Welcome back to the Manage to Win podcast. We got a great podcast for you today with Russ Hawkins of Agilence. Please remember our sponsor, candidly.com. It's soft skills, and it'll come up in this conversation on the podcast, how important it is to understand active listening skills and be respectful of other people and how to work with them so you can be your best. Candidly.com. There's animated trainings that are short, like 5 minutes. There's full-length trainings that are about an hour. It's inexpensive, and you get 7 days free to try it out. How can you go wrong? So we're going to talk with Russ Hawkins, who's the president and CEO of Agilence. And what they do is a lot of data analysis for people that helps retailers, grocers, restaurateurs, and other people just improve their operational effectiveness. But he's going to talk about leadership, working with other people, getting major breakthroughs to achieve the goals you want to achieve in your business. Let's dive in. Russ, you are like Mr. Analytical as far as analytics, metrics, people should shoot for. You've got incredible management experience. And I think you were mentioning you are like a lifetime problem solver like myself. I'm not sure where to start because I looked at your bio and you've got some interesting stuff there. And I could go down a rabbit trail, by the way, on your water conservation stuff. And I'm really into that because in California, we don't conserve water at all. And then we complain that we don't have enough.
Wow, you got big problems.
Yeah. This year we got lots of rain, but that's been rare. So in the old days, we used to get more rain like this, but we just don't. And anyway. But that's not why we're here. We're here for leaders and metrics. I'm not sure. Where do you want to start when you're talking with entrepreneurs and they know they got to track metrics? What are the metrics they're missing?
Well, I think you can only answer that question if you understand what the goal is and what the mission is, right? Where are you heading? I don't know what the metrics are unless I know where I'm going. And so I think the first thing for identifying and uncovering the appropriate metrics is to understand what the specific goal is and to be very succinct about that. And that's something I talk to people about all the time, both inside my company and externally, even with my kids. Goal setting is very, very important in life, and it's extremely important in business. And so once you understand the goals and you understand what the fundamental resources that are required to kind of achieve that goal. And I like to think of it as a triangle, right? I think the goal is at the peak of the triangle. The resources and people and training that you need to do is at the bottom. And then the how you're going to get there is the middle part, right? That's the execution strategy. And so when you get those things, when you've got the clear idea of where the goal is, you can start breaking it down into specific areas, specific metrics that you want to look at. So I mean, it really varies depending upon the situation.
Well, so a lot of our audience is in the computer industry, a lot of IT service providers, very entrepreneurial, and then we have a wide spectrum of people beyond that. So I don't know whether you've ever worked with people that are IT managed service providers, or maybe you'd like to share a story from a different industry, but maybe if we can flesh it out a little bit. I like your idea of the triangle. And is my perception correct that when you're talking about that triangle, so I've got the goal at the top and I've got my people, resources, whatever at the bottom, kind of that thick layer that's foundational for the triangle. What is that? Is that kind of nailing down your processes, or is that assigning the duties to your people? Or I'm not sure whether you want to start with a story or whether you want to dive into that.
Well, I think it includes both of those things. I mean, you can use a tool as simple as a SWOT analysis. I mean, I want to get to point B and I'm at point A. So, what are the resources? Looking at the resources that I have and what I've got. What are the strengths I can draw on that I've already got today? Where am I missing opportunities? Where am I missing capabilities? And if I identify things that I'm missing, I can obviously set objectives and metrics around improving that hole in the strategy. I think looking at the very broadly and with fresh eyes, if you can, the various types of opportunities that are available to you to achieve the goals that you want. And then you got to look at the people that are trying to keep you from doing it. And those are the things that are threatening you. So I think it is all about execution. And what you want to strive for, obviously, is flawless execution, but we never get there. The example that I would give you, and this is one that it's not directly IT services, but I go back to my roots in telecom. I worked. I had the very, very fortunate opportunity to work at the Bell system prior to the breakup. So I was, at prior. Most of your listeners probably are not old enough to remember this, but it used to be a complete monopoly, right? You only had one place to get telecom services. You only had one place to get telecom equipment, and that was from the phone company, and there was no other option. Of course, with the advent of MCI, which used to stand for Microwave Communications Inc., service providers, suddenly they became new options for service providers. And as a result of this, lawsuits were filed, and the federal government broke up the Bell system. And so it's an incredible situation that emerged out of that, which was you had these managers and business operators that had been running a business for 100 years, and suddenly their entire world changed. They pulled the rug out from underneath them, and they're suddenly needed to compete in a competitive environment. And I had a front row seat in seeing this happen. I got hired in the old company as kind of the new blood. And then I went with when they broke the company up, I went with the deregulated entity. And of course, all the guys and ladies that were running the deregulated entity were, brought up in the Bell system. So they had no idea what they were doing, and they really didn't have any idea what their goals ought to be and how they would get there. They didn't know what resources they needed. And so I got an opportunity to work very closely. I ended up on a business strategy task force that was to try to deal with this incomprehensible set of problems that these managers were facing. And it was absolutely astounding how people approach the job. I mean, most of these folks didn't know the difference between a lease and a rental. And here they are running, a company that's generating hundreds of millions of dollars a year, trying to provide leadership to a completely new team of people that have recently been cut out of their kind of mother's womb, the old Ma Bell womb. And it was just it was a chaotic and crazy circumstance. And so, what they never had, what I never saw, was a clear goal. They had been used to operating in an environment where they were guaranteed a return on their investment no matter what they did. I mean, they could be the worst managers in the world, and the regulatory infrastructure would guarantee them an 8% return on whatever they spent. So they had an incentive to spend money. And so when they came over to this new company, they thought the job was to spend more money and to spend more money doing things and investigating. And of course, that wasn't the goal. The goal really needed to be, how do you get to be profitable in a competitive environment with an aging product and an aging team? And so it was just a tremendous opportunity for me.
So you were brought in as the new blood.
Right.
And I think that brings in a really important factor. Years ago, I had someone on the show, or I talked to somebody, and what they did was once a quarter, they would have a retreat of the leadership team, and then they'd have a deeper retreat once a year. And they always paid to have somebody come in with an outside perspective. Somebody like, you've probably done this. I've done it a little bit, but, because they just wanted somebody who could shake it up a little bit. And they wanted to get somebody involved in the meeting who had the guts to speak their mind and challenge them, because otherwise they were kind of just doing the same thing over and over. And they might think it's different. And it sounds like that's the role you played. You were kind of a catalyst.
Well, in this particular situation, I was, and I did. And that, whether it was to my ultimate benefit or not, I had no problem speaking truth to power. The most senior executive in the company would make a statement that I would say, that's just not right. You just don't understand your own business. And so, I did play a little bit of that role. Now, a little bit later on, they brought in McKinsey. So I like to say I also kind of got my MBA by working elbow to elbow with McKinsey on this stuff. But it just cemented to me the clear need to understand where you wanted to end up in terms of what you're doing from a business standpoint. And then for me anyway, from there, it's relatively, it's a process. It's a well and easily understood process to say, okay, do I have the resources to do what I need to do? Do I have the understanding of the business problems that I'm going to solve? Do I have the outside help, the training and the standards to meet in those areas? And if those are all a question, those are all answered to the positive, then you can concentrate on execution, right? Then, which is the piece between that resource bottom of the triangle and the goal at the top. These guys were lost. They had no framework for thinking about it. They needed to bring in people like me and like McKinsey to kind of wake them up and say, hey, that old world is gone, and you need to think about today. What are the kind of pressures and opportunities that you've got, and then build a plan around each of them. And so, yeah, it was a great. Retrospectively, it was one of the best times of my life. At the time, it wasn't that great, but I enjoy telling.
You're alluding to something else, though, that I'd like you to peel back a little bit if you can. You may have a story on either end of the spectrum. But one of the things is when you're considering, and by the way, I do the same thing. I say you're at point A, you want to get to point B. When you're talking about you want to get to point B, there are some people, which has been my MO, particularly in the past, I want to run there really fast. And I'm either unrealistic, or I don't see all the steps, or I don't see all the detail. There's other people on the other side of the spectrum that are very concerned about the risk in making a mistake. And so they will go too slow, whether it's simple procrastination or it's like they're just going to take too much time doing stuff. And how do you kind of recognize where that Goldilocks in the middle is, where it's not too fast and not too slow? It's like just the right speed. Because if you and I are on the same page, which it sounds like we are, each one of these steps we're laying out, each one of these tasks has a deadline.
Yep.
And how do you think about that? Oh, and I want to peel back one more layer. Do you start with saying, well, wait a minute, let's get everybody in the room on the same page of what standard do we want to achieve when we get to point B? Is that excellent? Is that just competitive? Is it just average? What's the standard and what does that look like? Do you have that as part of the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there were two points in there. One was when do you reach this kind of balance between, first of all, we start by saying, as far as I'm concerned, everybody's going to have a bias for moving fast, right? You've got to move fast. You've got to try to grow quickly. You've got to try to get to those objectives as quickly as you can. However, as you point out, well, you didn't point out, but there are plenty of people who think that they want to study things forever, right? They study and study and study and study. Yeah. And I my view is that if you've got 70 or 80% of the data that's available, and another thing I like to say all the time is facts are our friends, right? We want to talk about facts, not about opinions. And I could relate this back to this AT&T thing many, many times, because these guys were used to studying things forever. I mean, they were engineers running the business. They wanted to get it to like 99% before they took decided to build an action plan. And my view is if you get to about 70, 80% of the data you think you need, then you've got enough to make a decision, and you need to make a decision, and then you need to drive forward with that. And so I'm not sure I could put it at the time, because I think it changes with each situation that you're dealing with. But perfection is not achievable. And, you want to make sure, though, that you are fact driven and that you've got at least enough information where if you do make a wrong choice, you haven't made it too bad, right? You could recover from it because you got a base of solid stuff there. The second part of it was, I'm not quite sure if you could maybe repeat the second part of that.
Second part was I was kind of backtracking. I probably should have started with it. Probably should have been the first. But you've already kind of alluded to it to a certain extent. But it's like when we finally have this thing fully done, and that may not be point B, that may be point C or point D, because we come out with 80%.
Well, you're always going to have another point to get to. No matter where you are, you're going to have another point.
But what standard of quality are we shooting for? Because it's like, I'll give Microsoft as an example. Now, when the current CTO took over, he changed things. He made things happen much faster. They came out with a slew of apps, okay? And some of them were, they weren't even what I would call 80%, okay? But his thing was to move fast because he'd been at a very bureaucratic organization. But the challenge is that I don't think they really define the standard of quality that they wanted to achieve, because there's some of those apps today that still are garbage in my mind. They've never gone back and taken them to the next level, because it was kind of like, let's just put a stake in the ground.
Sure. Well, Microsoft, of course, is kind of a unique scenario. A very, very, very large company who, it's hard to turn. So when you have a company that's hard to turn, I think you have to use every kind of stick you have to make it happen. And so I think doing a lot of things at once sends the message that we all have to move. And so you can afford to make more mistakes, I think, in that kind of scenario, with the assumption that people are going to figure out where the mistakes were made and drop them or modify over time. But I do think that you have to, depending upon, if you're talking about an app situation, there's certain minimal requirements, right? There's a minimum viable product, the concept of minimum viable product, where it's got to meet a specific set of use cases and deliver a certain amount of value. It's okay if it's not the fully blown version of that, but there's got to be at least that first step has to be made where whatever I'm delivering is going to deliver value to the folks that I'm working with. Now, in an app environment, that's almost required, because so much of it is about the iterative process, the understanding and learning from your customers about how things happen. I mean, I have that problem or opportunity, I guess, in my business today. The company that I run today is a company called Agilence, and it's a contraction of Agile Intelligence. We started out in the area of trying to minimize loss prevention in retailers. And what we've found now, though, is that the product can do so many other things. And we have kind of set up this virtual cycle of learning with our customers. Our customers figure out ways to use the product. They inform us. We add that into the product to be part of the standard process. And as a result, we get better and better over time. So we had this kind of minimum viable product for essentially diagnosing potential loss prevention situations. And that was our initial value. But over time, we've kept adding and adding and adding more functionality to where today we're used broadly across our customers' businesses to help them improve their operational effectiveness in every area of the business: marketing, merchandising, loss prevention, operations, even finance comes and uses our product because of the way that we've evolved over time. So minimum viable product, I think, is the initial standard from my perspective, but you're ultimately aiming for perfection, knowing that you're never going to get there.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Now, let me back it up a little bit. So you're in, and we talk about Microsoft, we talk about AT&T Bell System years ago. Sure. It's funny to hear you say MCI. I haven't heard about MCI probably over a decade or two. So interesting. But let's say you're on that team, you're like, okay, we got to shake things up. We got to change things, whether you're a member of the team or whether you're an outside consultant that's been brought in to provide sounding board advice, whatever. How do you deal with that person who's just stuck in the mud? It's like, we need to take more time. We need to think about this more. We need to research more. How do you deal with that?
Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to hear them out, and I want to hear more than just their opinion. I want to hear the basis of their opinion. Why do they believe that? What are the foundational items in their thought process that's leading them to that conclusion? Very often, what I've found is that if you start going down that pathway, you can start having meaningful discussions about some of the assumptions that are made that is forming that individual's perspective. Now, I'm not saying you can always be successful this way, but I like to listen. I think listening is an underutilized sense in business. A lot of people like to talk. I like to talk. People sometimes you gotta give me a hook, right? And I'm giving you that advice right now, but the reality is that listening is one of the most important aspects. And so I think you have to listen to those folks and you have to, I guess, respect them or respect their opinions up to a point, right? Now, if it becomes a kind of a religion thing, in other words, what I mean by that is that there's no empirical evidence to support somebody's position, then I think it's better. You're able to kind of bring it back. Well, let's talk facts. Let's not Let's not talk opinion. Let's not talk innuendo. Let's not talk extrapolation from the current situation, which is often what I find they rely upon. They rely upon, we always did this, or we're always done that, or this is the way it's always worked. This is what's been successful for us in the past. What that doesn't take into consideration is the threats of the current time. So by getting those kinds of individuals to talk, to explain the basis of their opinion, to kind of separate facts from opinion and extrapolation, I think then you can get down to the germ of the question. And usually what I've found is people are at least open to a dialogue there. You may never really convince them to get on board with what you want to do, but it becomes a useful process by having that conversation for the rest of the people in the organization and the discussion, because people's opinions are valuable, even if I don't agree with them, or it's based on some off base foundation that's caused them to believe what they believe.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. And what I like to say is that people want to feel heard and they want to feel valued, but you don't have to agree with them. And I want to just build on one of the things you said. Maybe you want to share a story or whatever from it. But I think that even when you don't agree with them, or at least you don't agree with them that it's going to get you to point B, but hey, this is something to get us to point C, D, E, or whatever. Having that discussion with active listening can help you really understand, well, if we did X, would that make you feel good? Okay, if we did Y, would that meet your requirement? So you can really take this sometimes emotional locked in, I don't want to go there, we've always done it that way, or I don't want to go there, too much risk or whatever, and get it back, peel it back a little bit and get to a specific target that you can aim for, which I heard you say earlier. That's really what you want those goals to be.
Absolutely. It's got to be clear. It's got to be succinct. And it's got to be understandable by everybody. That is the goals, as far as I'm concerned. But as far as, try to do something now to get to point B, where your real objective is to get to point C and D, you're going to get pushback, I think, from people who have always done it other ways. I mean, an example. Most of my career has been that kind of thing, as you mentioned up front, and as we shared earlier. Problem solving is what I look at. I've been the CEO of 3 startup companies. In all 3 cases, my perspective has been at the beginning to come in and listen. One of the things I do is I try to talk to certainly all the senior management people. I go out and I talk to competitors. I go out and call the CEO of my biggest competitors in these new companies, and I say, let's talk. Let me learn a little bit about you. Usually what I find with those situations, we compete against a lot of things, but there's a lot of areas, if we're in the same business, where we can cooperate and we can work together, and where we can potentially have some benefits. So my approach in these startups that I've run have been to understand what the environment is and the layout is, get my team members who are responsible for product. Tell me why your product is better than other people's. Talk to people on go-to-market, and explain to me what your go-to-market strategy and why do you think that's going to work. And by engaging them, valuing what they have to say, generally speaking, we can break it down into smaller and smaller pieces where we can agree on some small things, and then build on top of that to the next one and the next aggregation of beliefs. And then by the time you're done, you've got a team that's all rowing in the same direction. We've got a clear understanding of what we're trying to do. We've done an evaluation of the things we're doing today, what's working and what's not working, and we're not married to, well, this is the way we've always done it. I try to create an environment where people are willing to try things, and fail. If you're not failing, then you're not trying, and you're not going to achieve the goals that you want, because other companies out there and your competitors are going to be failing. I always use the analogy of my kids when they were trying to walk. Now, my wife is the one that really raised my kids, because I was out working all the time and often traveling. But if when in that very period of time when they were trying to walk, if I came back and they didn't have a bruise on them for banging into a wall or falling down a little bit, that my view was, hey, you didn't try hard enough. You gotta get back out there and make it work a little bit. So I just think that stepping back, understanding where you're going, stepping back, looking at the capabilities that you have in the team, pulling on the knowledge that you've got in your management team, in the team that's surrounding you in these businesses. If you take it slowly, you dig through things down to the granular piece at the bottom, you're going to find some truths, you're going to find some things to agree on, and then you can build back up there with the objective of focusing on that goal.
I love it. I love it. And that's all the positive. Now, flip it and talk to me about the negative. You go through this whole process, and I'm going to put words in your mouth here, but you're basically putting the relationship first instead of winning. And you're showing them respect. You're talking through that, and then you don't get buy-in. So talk to me about how you work through that to make certain you've done what's reasonable to engage with the person, but it's not going to work.
Well, I mean, obviously, the ultimate piece there is that if you're being respectful and you are active listening and you're trying to understand somebody else's point of view within the context of the goals that you're trying to achieve and the resources that you have, the ultimate thing is, well, maybe it won't be able to work. Now, if that's one person, that's fine. If it's 5 people, then maybe you've got something else to think of. The example that I'll think of right off the top of my head, I think it relates to this, is one of our strategies today. One of my strategies today is to grow the company through acquisitions. And so I had an idea and a company that I was very interested in, and we made an offer for this company. And then as these kinds of things work out, you really don't engage it broadly with your management team until after you've kind of agreed on the basics, right? So you're now into deep due diligence. And in this particular scenario, I was getting a lot of pushback, a tremendous amount of pushback about what we were trying to do and whether it was going to be accomplishable. And now my folks have a experience working with me, so they kind of know how I approach things. And in their case, they were able to construct arguments that made sense to me. They were able to show how what I was thinking was not based necessarily on fact, but was based more on my aspirational ideas about this particular company. They kind of confronted me with the facts around the product and what was possible with the product. They confronted me with the facts around the people that we would eventually be acquiring. And in that particular case, I had to admit that I was probably off base. So we modified our plan. We ended up not doing that deal, but we went out and we bought another company that was more aligned with what the team members. And at the end of the day, the team members are going to be the ones that are going to be executing on it. I can't do a job by myself, and so I had to make sure that we had some kind of alignment. Now, there's a fine line there, right? Because if people are engaging authentically in the process, then you're going to have a good outcome. If there's somebody that's just recalcitrant and doesn't want to be involved in it and has other issues that are maybe underlying that are informing it, then you have to address that more directly with that individual.
I think you also bring up a really key dynamic in healthy teams, in that you were trying to lead the team in one direction, and you have such a good relationship with them, whether you've trained them in this or whether they came with this skill, which is more rare. Usually it takes training and dialogue. But they knew, okay, as you indicated, Russ, Russ wants to go in this direction. We don't think it's the right direction. Here's how we need to approach Russ. It's not get into a fight, get into an argument, attack people personally. It's not bully them. It's have a mature, professional, respectful discussion that, once again, I'm going to offer puts the relationship first. Puts my relationship with Russ. I don't want to burn a bridge here. This is my friend, not just the person I work with. And so they gathered that data. They put things together. They probably thought a few chess moves ahead. Russ is going to say this when we bring this up, so then we're ready with this. And you also have the maturity where, because it was presented in a respectful way, you didn't care that they told you were dead wrong.
No,
am I right?
No. In fact, I thanked them.
That's right.
That's right. Because they were able to back up their perspective with facts and logic rather than opinion and innuendo, which is what I want to rip out. I mean, I think sometimes about what I have a friend who's a fighter pilot, and he talks about when they're running sorties and how they They plan for everything that they're going to do. First of all, they have a clear objective for every sortie that they run. They plan, they sit down before they get in the planes and they talk about how they're going to, the jets, and talk about how they're going to achieve, what each person's role in the team. And the leader relies on those people to do their job, right? And in fact, I want my people to tell me when I'm wrong. What I don't want is somebody not telling me when they think I'm wrong, right? Because that doesn't get anything done. But in this jet pilot thing, they have an objective, they sit down and they plan, and then they go out and they execute. Now, this is in a very compressed time frame, but what they do afterwards, they come back in the room again. And in the pilot world, what they do is they rip off their rank, they rip off their name tag, they have their their flight suit on with no designations, and they debrief. They debrief about what's going on and what happened on what happened in the effort that we just made. And each person in turn gets up and says, here's what I think, here's what I could have done better. And everybody in the audience has an opportunity to tell that person what they think and where they were. And the rule is that you say thank you, that the person standing up that's getting the feedback says thank you. And so again, we're back to active listening. We're back to, instead of me being up there, you criticizing how I banked the plane at this particular point, I'm up there saying, thank you for the feedback. I'm not going to try to justify my activity. I'm going to try to learn from it. And so I like to set an environment that encourages that and that values that in terms of the way we think and act and do every day. Now, I'm not always successful with it, but I can tell you that, you can get iteratively better by having that kind of a process. And so on this acquisition kind of thing that I was describing, it became very clear that I have people that are on my team that have expertise that I do not have. I have to recognize that I don't know everything. Not only do I not know everything, there's a lot of things I don't know at all. And so I have to rely on people's perspective, their analysis of the facts, and the conclusions that they bring from analyzing the facts. And I have to accept that, even if I believe it's different. And especially when you're working with a team, there's a long-term factor to this thing, because this isn't the only acquisition we're going to be doing. We're going to do another one and another one and another one, just like a jet pilot is going to fly another one and another one and another one. And the objective is to get incrementally better each time that you go through there, both in terms of achieving the goals of the task, the sortie or whatever it might be, but also in making the team more effective to deal with the problems. Because there's in business, one thing you can guarantee is that problems are going to emerge and that opportunities are going to present themselves. And you've got to have a team that's not afraid to say what they think, that recognizes that they're still part of a team, and we're all trying to move the ball forward. We all have a common goal. We're engaged in a common enterprise to achieve certain goals. And I'm sorry, I'm bad. Like I said, you got to slow me down from talking sometimes.
No, I think this is good. And I really would like to keep it going, but I try to keep it for our audience where we're about 30 minutes. Oh, so I'm going to cut it off now. But Russ, if they want to learn more about Agilence or get a hold of you, where should people go? Of course, we have links in the description. But for those that are listening, which is 98% of our audience, where do they go?
Well, right now, I can't give you a street address because we are now a completely virtual company. Back at the beginning of the pandemic, I was very fortunate, and I'll take some credit for having a great CTO, somebody who was prescient, who thought forward, was thinking about the future. And he had during 2021 built an ability for us to survive snow days. So the idea, we're in the Northeast, so the idea was, when a snow day comes, we want to be able to work virtually from home 100%. And so he had spent a lot of time with my blessing in creating that capability, and we were completely virtual. So I can't give you a street address because we have decided now to be a virtual company. We do not have an office anymore. When people ask me where are we headquartered, I say we're headquartered in the cloud. And you can reach the cloud at agilenceinc.com. And Agilence is a contraction of Agile Intelligence. So agilenceinc.com is our email address. My personal phone number that I'd be happy to talk to any of your listeners is 908-872-2727. and I'm a fan of 2 7s. I'm a fan of 2 and 7. Those are my lucky numbers.
Well, Russ, love talking with you. I think this has been good for our audience. I think it's great this time of year to kind of say, hey, let's take it up a notch. And I really appreciate your time.
Well, I really appreciate you inviting me on, David, and I wish you the best of luck as you move forward. And it's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for joining us today. I really had fun with that conversation with Russ. How about you? He's got great energy level, super sharp. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have him back on because there's some other thoughts I had based on his comments that you need to hear. So keep an eye out for that. Please remember our sponsor, Habitly.com. Leave us a comment or a rating. Send us feedback. If you think I can do something better for you, would love to do it. If you want to recommend a guest, that's fine. But we love having you here. I've got more great guests coming. So stay tuned, but bye for now.